Morning everyone. Today's chapter is an interlude, so it's the bard talking to the rabbits he was reading the story to. And if you remember from the end of chapter 13, Crom told his story of how he knew Podkin's dad and how he became blind. So we'll see what the bard has to say. The bard pauses, takes a swig from his cup. "Is that it?" says the inquisitive rabbit, folding her arms and pouting. "What about when Podkin becomes the Horned King? What about all the battles and fighting and chopping things into pieces with his magic dagger?" "This must be when he starts to be the Horned King," says the sensible rabbit. "The warren in the forest is where his army lives in the stories. They have a secret home where nobody can find them, don't they?" "That's just stupid," replies the inquisitive rabbit. "Why would a whole warren full of rabbits just up and leave? If your dad vanished, we'd just pick another chieftain and carry on like before." There is a grunt from the fireside where Chief Hubert had been listening along. The inquisitive rabbit has the decency to squirm and look a bit embarrassed. "The way rabbits feel about their chieftains is complicated," says the bard. "They believe they are chosen by the goddess herself to lead them. If a warren loses its chief and he has no sons to take over, it is seen as a bad omen. So they would often rather pack up and find homes elsewhere, in happy, lucky warrens." "So Dark Hollow is cursed?" the sensible rabbit asks. "Perhaps," says the bard, "but then its chief did come back, in a way. And besides, not everyone believes in all that rubbish." "Never mind that," says the inquisitive rabbit. "What about the fighting? When does Podkin One Ear get revenge against the Gorm?" "Stories aren't all about fighting and revenge," says the bard. "You have to have a bit of character development in there as well. Some suspense, some atmosphere, a little bit of romance." "Yuck!" All the little listening rabbits made retching, spewing noises and pulled their ears over their eyes. The bard sighed. By Clarion's sacred heartstrings, you lot are a hard crowd to please," he says. "Very well, revenge against the Gorm it is then." Chapter 14, The Wagon in the Woods. A month or so passed in the Warren of Dark Hollow, and everyone had fallen into a comfortable routine. The warren had been thoroughly swept and aired, dust sheets were moved, cobwebs brushed away. The place looked more like a home and less of a haunted shell. The rabbits had found their own rooms amongst the empty burrows, beaten and plumped the mattresses, and settled themselves in. Mish and Mash were bunked next door to Podkin, Paz and Pook, and Crom had chosen a room on the other side of the long burrow. Podkin had thought Crom might take the old chieftain's chambers, but he had opted for a simple cell with a cot and a rack for his armour and weapons. Nobody questioned him about his choice. The short winter days were spent keeping busy. Mornings saw Podkin, Paz and Pook foraging the forest floor for winter catches of nuts and seeds hidden away by squirrels. Mish and Mash took to the trees, gathering whatever they could find, while Crom chopped firewood. In the afternoon, the rabbits trained. Mish and Mash taught the little ones acrobatics, backflips, headstands and somersaults, and Crom gave Podkin sword lessons. The little rabbit was a bit reluctant at first, but Crom insisted that a chieftain's son must know how to fight, and there was no sneaking off to a hidden cupboard or secret cubbyhole this time. Crom was nothing like old Melfrey, the weapon master from Bunbury. Every time he got even slightly cross with Podkin, the image of Shape and Quince getting pummeled flashed through the little rabbit's mind. Crom was not someone you wanted to annoy. They used wooden practice swords, which Podkin quickly discovered tended to leave nasty welts and bruises wherever they hit you, which was pretty much everywhere. Paz usually joined the classes as well, much to Podkin's annoyance. She stood nearby, mirroring his movements with her own sword. From the corner of his eye, Podkin could see she was naturally much better than him, which only made him angry. That made him lose his focus and make mistakes, leading to another clonk on the head. Sometimes Crom asked her to join in, and that was even more embarrassing. Paz was bigger, quicker, and faster than Pod, and it was all he could do to keep dodging and rolling out of the way. He wished she'd go and play with Pook or hunt berries for tea. One afternoon in particular was really difficult for Podkin. He had been working on blocking and parrying with Crom, and for once felt like he was getting somewhere. After he had managed to turn aside Crom's wooden blade for the third time, They paused for a breather. As Pod leant on his sword, panting for breath and rubbing his latest lump on his head, Crom cleared his throat. Thinking that he was due some praise for his effort, Podkin's little chest puffed up and a smile twitched the corners of his mouth. A good word from Crom had come to mean so much to the little rabbit, especially as it didn't happen very often. But instead, the old warrior waved a hand at where Paz was standing, swishing her sword about and generally showing off. "Come on, Paz, let's see if he can block you as well." "Oh, badger's bottoms," thought Podkin, as his sister came skipping over, cocky as anything and grinning from ear to ear. Before he could protest, she swung her wooden sword at him, just missing his whiskers. "Don't dodge, Podkin, block!" Jab, jab, swing. Paz came at him relentlessly. He tried to remember the parrying technique he'd just mastered, but in his panic not to let his sister beat him, it all went out of his head. Clonk! She caught him on the shoulder. Whack! She smacked him on the nose. She was winding up for another swing when Pod's temper got the better of him. "Stop it!" he screamed, and flung his practice sword at Paz. "This is stupid. I'm never going to learn to fight. I don't want to learn to fight. Paz, you can be the chieftain and she can stick her poxy wooden swords in her ear holes." Crom's brow was furrowed. Paz's face was surprised, and worse, amused. He'd made a complete idiot of himself in front of his father's old friend, just like the old spoilt Podkin would have done. It was too much. He turned and ran off into the woods. An hour or so later, when he couldn't feel his toes anymore, he slunk back into the warren. Crom was waiting for him by the fire. Podkin went and stood before him, shivering. He expected a telling off, deserved it even. He knew that. But Crom just put one of his big scarred hands on Podkin's shoulder and gently squeezed. "I'm sorry," Podkin said, his voice small and almost lost amongst the crackling of the fire. "Don't be," said Crom. "You did well today. I shouldn't have pushed you so hard. I forget how young you are sometimes. Goddess knows you should have seen me when I was your age. I didn't know a spear from a carrot." "But Paz, she's older and bigger than you. Her reach is longer and she's fast. But keep trying like you did today and you'll be the one whacking her on the head soon enough." "That will make a nice change," thought Podkin, but didn't say it out loud. Instead, he promised himself he wouldn't lose his cool again. He wanted to make Crom proud, maybe because it was the closest he could get to making his father proud. And from then on, he doubled his effort, swallowed his pride, and tried to learn something from each new bruise. In the evenings, they prepared whatever they had scavenged from the forest and sat down to eat by the fire. There was never very much, and their stomachs always seemed empty, but at least they didn't starve. The dark, hollow well was still good, and with a supply fresh of water, Crom thought they would be fine until spring, when there would be more food around. Podkin was very glad because the warrior rabbit had told them several stories about being stranded with no food and having to eat worms and beetles. Pook seemed quite excited by the idea, but the only crunchy things Podkin liked to eat were carrots and turnips. And that was how life went on, pleasantly boring and quiet, up until, that is, the day that Mish and Mash saw the wagon. And we'll stop there and finish this chapter on Thursday. Have a good day.